Amy Posner here, and I want to talk to you about a very important topic for copywriters, and that is pricing and being seduced by big numbers. You probably know, if you've been around copywriting for any time at all, that pricing can be all over the map, right? It's like one person is charging $3,000 to write a website, and another person is charging $3,000 to write one page of a website. Somebody's charging $8,000 or $3,000 for a sales letter. Someone else is getting near 20 grand. What is the difference? Let's talk about that a little bit. Now, it's very easy to get seduced by big numbers. Of course it is. I mean, like if someone asks you, would you rather have a $20,000 project or would you rather have a $5,000 project? I mean, your mind immediately goes to, I'd rather have $20,000 than five. But here's the thing. There's a big difference between a $20,000 project and, say, doing four $5,000 projects. What tends to happen is the bigger projects are much more complex in scope. And of course, they cost a lot more money, but they also take a lot more time and a lot more mental focus. And so what you have to think about is whether you want to be that involved, whether you want to do all the details, whether you want to have a big project with lots of moving parts that you have to track that can be complex, where you might require a client to pay you in stages, which may be different than your typical terms. So there's a lot of things to consider. And I want to suggest to you that based on how you're wired, you may prefer one or the other type of project. So just to use myself as an example, it's not unusual in previous years for me to take projects that were maybe $17,000, $18,000 range to maybe $25,000. Now, I've been around for a while, so part of that is that I can command higher rates for the same work that somebody who's brand new and less seasoned just can't get as much money for. So there's that, and that factors in, of course, to everything. And I would argue it's not really how long you've been doing it, but what kind of results you can get. If you've been doing this a year and you get the same results as me, you should get the same money as me. On the other hand, I've also built a reputation, so that factors in too, less on my side than a potential client's viewpoint. But here's the thing. A $25,000 project, for example, I can think of two offhand. One was a fairly complex website that I did where we also created all of the email flows that came out of all the possible scenarios for an e-commerce brand. And I actually hired someone in that project, the most brilliant Summer Oase, who helped me to configure the emails because she's an email expert. I hired her to map out the different flows for me because she's an e-commerce and email expert. I'm expert at writing emails, but mapping out these complex flows from so many different directions, that's not something I'm used to doing. And so obviously she thought of things that I never even would have known, including where things could overlap, which was very helpful for me to figure out how much time I actually needed and what direction I should take. So the other project that I did that was complex in scope was a lead gen funnel that was a direct mail response piece. This is a company who loves Dan Kennedy. They've followed him for years and years. He consults with them every year, and they still do old style direct response marketing and pretty cool stuff. I got to create this package with a box in it that came with an MP3 player and all kinds of little gizmos. And, it's fun. It's fun opening a box and getting all of these things. It's a little bit old school now. People don't get those things, so they tend to look at them in a little more detail. So that project had fewer moving parts, but there's a lot of research. I was also working with the marketing team. And so there were meetings, there were people to, run things by in a department where we had to get several people together. And I knew that going in. So I built that in terms of time, but also in terms of stress level. Because here's the thing, when you know yourself and you know what things are easy for you to do and what things are a little more challenging, you want to make sure you're getting adequately compensated for the things that are more challenging. And I tend to refer to it as non-resentment pricing. Like, at what price am I going to feel good about this, even if I run into headaches or snafus or something unexpected? Because that almost always happens anyway. So I like to build it in. I have enough experience to know that if it turns out I don't run into those things, which is rare, that I can compensate the client in other ways. I can do something a little extra. I'm always going to deliver the value. I just don't want to be in a position where I'm thinking, damn, I wish I had charged more. And I've been in that position, believe me. One particularly memorable project where I think I probably charged about 30% of what I should have. And I learned a ton of lessons from that particular project. But what I want you to think about is what's going to match best with sort of how you work. Are you going to be happy having this one project? You may work on other things concurrently. I always did because I needed to like leave something for a while and move on to something else. But will you enjoy being really in depth, really involved, talking to people at the company, talking to customers, talking to clients more than you would on a smaller project? You're going to talk to more people. You're going to have more communication with more people at the company. That's one scenario. The other scenario for me, for example, was I had a really simple lead gen funnel that I did for $7,500 to $8,500, and 2.5 of those would equal one $20,000 project, and these were much more contained. They were easier for me to do. So I just want to warn you to be careful when you see a big number, and this means even internally. When you go to scope something and you're like, you're putting together all the pieces, and you're like, wait. And based on my internal hourly or however I figure things, this project's going to be like $18,000. Is that, that's crazy. And what makes you think it's crazy is the big number, right? Like, they won't accept that, or that'll seem like too much. And the truth is, it's the value of the work, right? And you've broken it down and you know how long it will take you. And so don't be intimidated by that number, but also know that there are big expectations for big numbers. With my lead gen funnels, they weren't exactly repetitive because, each company was different and I had to, do the research and understand them. But I had a formula for doing the opt-in, the emails, the landing page. Sometimes the lead magnet was included in some of the projects too. So I knew what those pieces were. I knew how long they took me to do. I had a style for writing each type. So I knew even what kinds of information I needed to go after and how I needed to do it. I did not have that blueprint for the bigger projects because they tended to be much more custom and much more one-off. And just one other thing to be aware of, and sometimes those bigger projects come from bigger companies. The website that I told you about happened to be, I would say they're more a small to medium-sized business, but I was working directly with someone in the C-suite. And so it wasn't layered like the one I told you about that was direct response. So took more time for me to communicate with those people, where in the other scenario, it was much more direct and much easier. You have to price. When I said non-resentment pricing, it's what is going to make you feel good when you're a week into the project or a month into the project. Hit a wall, but you know what? I'm getting paid to hit walls. I'm just going to back up and go in another direction because that's the truth. But there's nothing worse than, you get to that 18,000 number and you go, oh, that's too big. I'll just bring it down to 12 or, whatever number I think will feel comfortable to them. Mind you, that's totally made up. And then you resent them because you've taken on the work and it's way more complex than you thought. And, you see, your money dwindling away as the hours rack up. So these are just some things to be aware of, especially when you're considering, the seductive power of big numbers, because let's face it, when you think about if you have a year and say, you want to make 100,000 in a year and someone comes along and, it turns out to be a $20,000 project and you're thinking, oh, well, I've covered a fifth of my year. But consider it may also take you a fifth of the time and it may not be something you want to be so deeply submerged in. So I hope this is helpful. Consider all of the factors when you go to price something, and please, please, please don't undervalue yourself in the marketplace. I hope this helps. If you want to be notified when these videos drop each week, you can click the bell. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.